You are listening to Talking Images, the official podcast of icmforum.com. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to our second ever season finale of Talking Images. We have been on for 2 full years now, covering a total of 44 episodes, not counting our glorious pilot. What a ride it has been. It feels like just yesterday we recorded our first season finale, though our wish for a COVID-free 2021 clearly did not come true. So, guys, how are you holding up?
Hi, it's Tom. I'm holding up okay here in the UK. Things have been gradually getting back to normal, but we're still a bit wary of how it's going to pan out over the coming weeks for the Christmas season. So we're yet to see how that is, but things are looking a bit better than they were last year. Let's put it that way.
What about you, Saul? How are things going in Australia?
Look, in Australia, it's different sides of the country. On my side of the country, we've been pretty normal for a while. I think pretty much the whole of 2021 has been mask-free, other than a couple of minor breakouts, mask-free, life carrying on like usual. The only difference is we've shut ourselves off from the rest of the country, and that's annoying some people, so there's now a push to reopen. So 2021 has been much like 2020, minimal social distancing, minimal limits on venues, no mask wearing in general, but then in 2022, it looks like we're going to have to go back to wearing masks and limits and everything else the rest of the world is doing, because there's a gigantic push to open up the borders and to let the Omicron variant into Western Australia, which is very interesting. And I guess this makes it a very apt time to do a podcast on Omicron.
Oh yeah, I guess you can say that for sure. And I'm not sure what I would have picked, to be honest. I think I just prefer to live in my little bubble and not have to worry about it. Because here it's been masks on since it started, essentially. We had 9 months straight of masks on, even outside if you were walking in the forest. And then they were gone all summer. It's fine. And now the masks outside are coming back. So, yeah, it's going to be an interesting 2022, let's put it like that.
For everyone, I think. But one thing's for sure, though, whatever happens, Talking Images will continue. So never fear, listeners. We'll be carrying on and bringing you these podcasts no matter what happens in 2022.
Yeah, exactly. And if we get even more extreme lockdowns, you might even get more episodes. And from that perspective, I suppose it really is a bit of a Christmas present, and that this Omicron is coming in. But yeah, no, that's like as pretty much all of us feared and expected, to just more and more new variants coming in. Omicron definitely won't be the last, but it's yet another variant to just get anxious and scared about. But even as the cases go up, restrictions increase, and there's just no real light in sight here. I mean, even with the vaccines, etc., new variants keep coming, and everything essentially resets. Even with hope that we have to just speak about the elephant in the room here, namely that someone, or rather something, or should I perhaps just come out and say it, one specific film is really profiting from all of this. I'm talking, of course, of Ugo Gregoretti's 1963 film Omicron, starring Renato Salvatore, because this is probably the best advertisement, yet alone free advertisement, this film has gotten in almost 60 years. I mean, let's not forget here, Ugo Gregoretti is mostly known for being the least known co-director of Rogo Pauci. So known that he only got his first letter in the title, while everyone else got their first 2. And now there is genuinely a market to talk about this film. A film that's been in the shadows for about 58 years. So that is just what we'll do. The memes are flying around already, and honestly, we love it. We hope we can get even more eyes on Omicron, as the film is surprisingly, genuinely good, worth seeing, has some surprisingly apt commentary, and even has some tie-ins with the pandemic itself. So, Saul, you were not only the only co-host that had already seen Omicron before this new variant came out, but it's also one of your favorite films. So proselytize a bit here. What is so great about Omicron?
Yeah, so Omicron is a film that I'd actually seeked out or sought out for very many years, because in Rogopag, Gregoretti's sequence was always my favorite sequence. I mean, Pasolini's cheese one or whatever always seemed to get a lot of the acclaim. But yeah, the sequence, which Gregoretti, was always my favorite part. So I managed to eventually locate Omicron around 4 years ago. No, not the Omicron variant, Omicron the film. And when I sat down to watch it, I was a bit apprehensive. I've been seeking out this film for about 10 years. But no, it was absolutely excellent, because it's basically a satire or maybe parody on the way the human body works. So we've got an alien who's taken over the dead body of a human being, but unlike in most films, if you think of things like Invasion of the Body Snatchers or ones where aliens take over human beings, he actually has a lot of trouble learning to use the human body. And just the very mechanical ways that he moves his body is absolutely hilarious. Like, he's trying to use his arm and he's like putting it out like one of those machines in the game arcades where you try and like use the hand or whatever to go down and like grab a toy and bring it back up. So it's like he's moving it like a joystick, and all of his like facial expressions are just copied off what he's seeing other people doing, with absolutely hilarious results. And, the film does, detour into some other things with union rights and whatever. But yeah, it's just a fantastic way of looking at how weird our human bodies are when we don't actually think how weird they are. But, everything, from, smoking and being able to blow out smoke to different things like blowing raspberries to just the ways that we walk, and just some hilarious stuff, like he's trying to like copy these rabbits or whatever, and he ends up, hopping along, and he sort of like jumps up to pray, and the way he lands is exactly the way other people are praying. It's just an amazing look at just how strange our human bodies are in ways that we don't really tend to think about it as adults.
So what about you, Tom? Did you, what was your reaction to seeing Omicron for the first time? Did it live up to your expectations?
It certainly did. I mean, the only expectations I had was hearing that Sol had enjoyed it, and the director, Ugo Gregoretti, had never encountered any of his works before. So, I wasn't really sure what to expect, but we got a brilliantly inventive sci-fi, and as Sol said, the situational comedy around the alien host who takes over the body of this worker is just brilliant. The situations that he gets into are all hilarious. I think one of my favourites is when he first begins to learn how to walk in the hospital, and he just shuffles around at a rapid pace, and he crashes into all the walls and the doors and just keeps on going. And it's just hilarious, the imagination behind this. And it's interesting that Gregoretti also wrote the screenplay for the film as well. This is a very creative director with lots of talent. And I'm very intrigued to look into the other films he's worked on, because if they're anything like Omicron, then hopefully we'll be in for a treat.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely say that you should probably seek out Rogopag or Rogopag, because he does showcase a lot of his promise there as well, even though it is a very different short. And there's obviously three great and massive directors present there with Godard, Rossellini, and Pasolini. But yeah, I think for Omicron, my first thought, seeing this, at least around the 5 to 10 minute mark, was that, yeah, I can see why Saul loves this movie, because like anyone who knows Saul knows that he loves body horror, and while this is a comedy, like the body horror elements are genuinely there. I mean, the way the film just focuses in on what this man, or rather this being inside of this man, does with the body. It is that body horror experience of just focusing on the body, seeing it make these odd gestures and movement. It's just so unique, honestly. It's I've never seen this done in this way in a comedy before. Like Saul said, it's so mechanical, and I love the way that it kind of creates this set of expectations as he essentially goes through every single type of regular human movement and behavior and bodily function with a few notable examples, and you kind of see what happens, that he goes all in. Like, if someone makes a sound, he'll emulate that sound to its most extreme function. If someone does a movement, he'll emulate that movement to some extreme function, and you just know where this could go, and it just seems so genuinely inhuman, and the results are just hilarious. Especially that scene you talked about with the crying religious women, when you also have his added internal thought process where he thinks that their tears are these people producing their own food, so he emulates the tears and then essentially drinks his own tears. It's just such an insane sight, and it works so well. It's just, so yeah, I can just really see why you love this film so much, Sal.
I'm really pleased that you guys have responded well to Omicron. Because, yeah, it's a sort of film where, I mention it and nobody's even heard of it before. But, as soon as they announced the name of this new variant of COVID, this was the first thing that came to mind.
I really liked how the film started on quite a serious note. I mean, you've got this gripping opening sequence that displays all the hallmarks of a 60s Italian crime thriller, when a woman and a young children accidentally uncover the corpse of a man. And it's shot really well, with the camera being behind these long tubes, kind of creating this claustrophobic image of the woman uncovering the corpse. And it's not until, maybe 5-10 minutes in until the comedy starts. And I think that's a great introduction to the film. But then when the comedic elements come into play, it really engages the viewer. I mean, it's such an intriguing scenario of a corpse coming back to life. And as we said, it's played for obvious laughs, but it also showcases a lot of inventive humour, and I think that's where Omicron really shines.
Yeah, the photography in Omicron is absolutely amazing. I agree with those opening tube shots, but just a lot of just the angles throughout, and the way that the director of photography, Carlo De Palma, the way he uses smoke and gets into each shot is absolutely amazing. And Carlo De Palma, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, was, of course, Michelangelo Antonioni's right hand, shooting Blow Up and Red Desert for him, which is two of Antonioni's most mysterious films with the most sense of mystery. So he's really great for that. He also did the Woody Allen film, Shadows and Fog, and Luscious Black and White. And Black and White is really where Carlo De Palma really succeeds, for me at least, as a cinematographer, even though, of course, I guess blow-ups in colour. But just, his black and white work he's done with various directors over the years is amazing. And, the film just looks absolutely stunning.
It is good to see such an outright in-your-face comedy with that kind of cinematography as well, because that's not something that you often get. And it adds a lot of layers to the film that allow you to appreciate it for far more than the humour.
And I think I want to go back to what you said before too, Tom, that like the first 5 to 10 minutes, they don't feel like a comedy at all. And that's one of the most interesting choices Giorgetti made in this film, because it doesn't really use the type of normal comedy cinematic language, if you will. Like, there's no engaging, hectic music coming into the movie. The first 5 to 10 movies genuinely feel like some kind of grim Italian thriller or even proto-giallo. And as the film continues, there's very few sound effects. There's very little, again, fast-paced music. There's no boings. There's none of that, the elements you usually expect in a 60s Italian comedy, especially the more mainstream silly ones like with Toto, for instance. So it plays very, very differently. And this is why, like, the body comedy element early on, it's so startling as well, because you just don't know where this movie is going. It set up this relatively serious mood, and then suddenly this mechanical body starts hitting people in the face and acting in completely unusual ways, and it takes you off guard. And then that kind of tone, that kind of language kind of continues with the film, and most of the comedy comes from either the body itself or the commentary of Omicron, the secret agent that has possessed his body.
Yes, the commentary is one of the strongest points of Omicron, because that's where he makes all his observations, and he keeps hilariously referring to human bodies as prehistoric. And there are just lots of great moments, and they're just so well timed up. Like, there's a part where, without spoiling it too much, he's considering killing his human host body, and he's just about to do it, and then this commentary or conversation with his real background that suddenly stops him, mid-sentence. He just sort of looks and stares directly into the camera. So yeah, it's all incredibly well timed, and it's just, it's just a great observational thing. It really is, what, human civilization would look like to aliens. And it just does so much more than the average Body Snatchers film, as I mentioned earlier.
As well as the brilliant commentary, the monologues that you hear from Omicron, you also get the communication that he has telepathically with his superiors, the rest of the alien race who are off planet, and that leads to a lot of humour as well. And it adds a nice contrast and a parallel to Omicron's human host, Angelo, because he has a lot of interactions with his superiors in the factory that he works in as well. So you got a nice parallel between the human and the alien elements, and that works really well for the political satire as well.
Yeah, speaking of the political satire and the factory, one of the funniest parts over there is, suddenly the sidekick is, we're going to redeploy, suddenly he's getting in there and he's doing, hundreds of these, every single minute. So it just really makes you think about the labor market and the way that workers are exploited a little bit, which does tie into some of the union stuff that the film later on brings up. But I guess it's all shows you, maybe what the human body is capable of, or what somebody will be capable of doing with their body if they didn't realize that, if I keep working at this rate or whatever, I'm going to get exhausted. So there's actually a lot the human body can do it and can endure. If you've got, endorphins in there or an adrenaline rush, you actually can do all that. But, obviously, we don't do it every single day. But an alien just suddenly becomes into the human body, yeah, maybe they're capable of doing that for a little bit.
In a way, it almost foreshadows robotics industry that comes in and has implemented a lot of changes in factory working throughout the last 50 years, because you see this human who's been taken over by an alien and he can just work with no limits and produce huge amount of products. And in a way, there's a kind of foreshadowing going on there.
In some ways, his body is and works as a machine, which ties in with just this kind of brutish expression here too, where we just see him go at it as if he was part of the machinery. It's just at such a high speed to the point that he just breaks the machines because he's too quick for them. There's some hilarious scenes there, and yeah, I suppose even if I'm not sure if they necessarily foreshadows it, but it certainly, showcases what an owner of a factory would choose if they had the opportunity.
A lot of the humour in Omicron gave me a similar feeling to that of watching the excellent Ealing sci-fi comedy, The Man in the White Suit. And although the subject matter in these two films is very different, both films approach their sci-fi ideas from a playful angle and use this concept as a stepping stone for a kind of classic caper comedy. And as we've mentioned already, both films have a satirical slant that brings extra impact and provides food for thought alongside the humour.
Yeah, and the satire elements there are really interesting because it really punches in a lot of different directions. I mean, from what we've said so far, you could expect that it would be, all out in the favor of the workers, but the workers are shown terribly here. I mean, they're brutish, they're violent, they're self-centered, they will almost, they will beat up or hurt anyone who could get in the way of their aims, essentially. They're really not portrayed as particularly nice people. And this is probably why a lot of it's very clear and direct class analysis, because it does actually have a bit of a point, a bit of an ominous point or statement, rather, about class society. And I think the fact that it does punch in every direction early on gives it a lot of room to just do that. I can't really think of many other films that's just done this so directly and intuitively when Omicron, lays out his plan. He's finally got it. He's, read all the books in existence. He's finally studied all of human society, and he's realized that, you don't need to go to war with humans at all. They just need essentially a few thousand aliens like him to come in, take over a couple of thousand bodies, and then they can control the entire world because, as he says, there is a clear class society. They just need to take over the top, the top elites, the owners, the few billionaires, multimillionaires on top, and then they control everything. It even goes as far as to give, a clear economic showcase. Here, finally, I think this is one of the few places with comedic sound effects. Probably to sell it a bit better, showing how, the economy is owned by just a few companies that both employ the majority of the people and give them their salary, and then these people spend their salary buying products of these companies. It shows the cycle. It shows people, getting money, running to buy the cars in ultra speed, and then it just shows it very clearly owners on one side, workers and consumers on the others. And it really just hammers that point down over and over again. And I think it's quite fair to say that, Gregoretti is probably or quite clearly a leftist. It's quite easy to see why he would be, for instance, working with Godard or Pasolini in Rogo Paci. But I really think that class analysis in particular, it's very rare to see it in a film like this, but I think it's one of the clearest examples we've seen in a film of this type. And I also think it's just really well done, honestly, and it fits the movie quite well. And it's just done with so much humor and clarity.
Yeah, that's an excellent point about the consumer society and the way Omicron depicts it. And yeah, you're entirely correct with the way they've got the scenes of the cars being sold and Omicron trying to describe it to his ruler, and the way he describes it to his rulers or his bosses sounds absolutely ridiculous. They're like, okay, well, we need to have these consumers, and his bosses are like, well, they buy the stuff that the rich people sell, and they're like, well, who pays them? Where do they get money from? All the rich people. And when you put it like that way, it sort of seems a bit ridiculous, like the government or people in charge give us this money, so we then give it back to the upper classes. They give it to us, and we give money back to them, and keep giving back to them, and they keep giving back to us. And when you put it that way, the way that consumer society works does absolutely seem absolutely ridiculous. And I guess when one of the more creative or more interesting parts of it, the Omicron's boss or ruler asks him to imagine or to visualize the wealthy people without their clothes on, which is, absolutely, insane and whatever. And yeah, just absolutely makes the those people who are in charge, those who've actually got the money and power, seem absolutely ridiculous, which, perhaps they are.
You've made some excellent points there, and it's a good job that it's in a comedy, because otherwise the angle that Gregoretti is going for could be quite sobering, because it can have quite a powerful impact. One thing I want to mention that Chris touched upon briefly was where Omicron learns to read, and this for me was one of the standout pieces of comedy in the film, because as soon as he learns to read, he has the ability to scan through books at an immense speed, and we see him read a number of well-known books, and his reactions to the different novels he takes in are fantastic.
Oh yes, absolutely hilarious.
My particular favourite is when he stumbles upon a book of Brigitte Bardot's photo shoots, and he's so taken with it that he pockets it to return to later on.
Yeah, that's an absolutely great scene, the one where he's speed reading through all the books. And what you do mention about Gregoretti and whether he made it a bit of a sobering film, I don't know if we want to get into spoiler territory or have some spoilers later on. But I would say this much, even though a lot of the film is a laugh out loud affair, I think it does hit some very serious things. Maybe a little bit later on, looking a bit about the vulnerability of humankind. But yeah, I don't want to spoil it too much until we get to that stage of the episode.
I think you can spoil away, Saul. Go for it.
Okay, so you guys have been warned. Spoilers to come. Spoiler warning. So the film ends with this news footage of Angelo, or the host of Omicron, of his body being crushed by workers who are storming back to work. And we think, okay, it's just ended there. And the TV producers go on about his crazy UFO and alien invasions and conspiracies. And we think, it's all landed there. And we gradually see that there's these people sitting around and watching the footage. And, initially you think, okay, these are just, bosses of the factory, and they're going, look, it's a shame this guy died or whatever, but at least we can put plans into place. But then their conversations get progressively stranger, and they start to talk about things like placing limits and human emotions. And then the film ends with this amazing shot where they all begin to smoke the same way that Omicron smokes, and all the smoke just like pours out of their mouth, just breathes and fills up the whole room. And you think to yourself, or whatever, the aliens have. Oh, I'm not swearing on the podcast, am I?
It's fine. It just amused me.
Oh, damn.
Yeah. Oh, damn. The aliens have taken over. You're welcome to bleep me out.
Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
I was just going to say I totally agree with Sol there. The ending is sublime. It pulls the rug from under an unsuspecting audience in a grand manner at the end there, with the reveal of how they smoke is the same way that Omicron smokes. And it ends the film with a smart and amusing twist, which makes for a memorable finale. One part of me does wonder whether a slightly more ambiguous ending would have fitted as well, with the smoking scene removed, so you're kind of left in the dark as to whether the people around the table at the end are actually aliens or not, whether that would have had just as strong an impact. But as it is, I think it's a fitting end to the film, and it ends on quite a high note for me.
And there's also a little bit of hope there, isn't it? I mean, it's ominous in itself, but Omicron essentially dies trying to transmit that there is this thing inside the human body called empathy, and that this empathy will essentially take over, and they won't be able to hold the bodies forever, and the empathy could even kill them. So there is this idea as well that these people who have been possessed there in the end, that, it's not going to necessarily last. So that is built into the film as well. So perhaps it's even a little bit of a positive ending, that, these people, their plot won't actually succeed.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Chris, because we see that with Omicron towards the end as well, where Omicron and Angelo are both talking to each other in the same body, and they're battling for control over the shared body. And this makes for quite a compelling scene in a busy subway carriage where Omicron is beset by all the workers. And again, the strong cinematography comes into play there. And it's an interesting element of the film that I wish would have been explored more, this battle between the human and alien control in the same body. But as it is, that was one of the memorable sequences for me.
Yeah, the real Angelo is not really shown until the end, so he's kind of not really a part of that of the film. So even though you kind of want to feel for him, you're left a little bit confused, because you don't know who he is. You don't really have this inbuilt knowledge of who he is or this connection to him. So it's I guess having that stretched out could definitely have helped the film be even stronger. Like for a while, you're not sure if it's Omicron becoming more human, or if it's Angelo fighting back, or if it's both. But it is some interesting development as Omicron stops being this machine-like being specifically just trying to mimic human behavior and actually goes into the real world and gets some kind of additional agency, learns to speak, etc. And of course, the first thing he learns is to swear at the drivers, which perhaps is very fitting.
So we've had a lot of positive things to say about the film because it is, it's a wild ride, it's a lot of fun. I'm curious to find out if there are any things that you think perhaps didn't work as well as they could have.
I'm still torn between whether or not it was a very good movie or potentially a great movie, and I'm leaning towards very good. And I think there is some slight tonal issues here that made it a little difficult to fully embrace it. And we talked about it earlier, where the first 5 to 10 minutes are literally just a thriller, and it's well done and everything, but it doesn't really jive that well with the rest of the film. Like, what do we care about the inspector trying to, find out what happened, for instance? I mean, it's a build-up, and it makes what happens later more of a surprise, but it's not, a clear-cut, concise comedy as it could have been. That's both a strength and a weakness. I struggle with that because that's one of the more unique things about it too. It's certainly one of the things I appreciate the most about it. But I do think that if it had leaned a little more into being a full-on comedy from the beginning, I might have liked it even more. But yeah, it's really difficult for me to say because the way it's done is so special and unique that it's worth it.
The only part of Omicron which I do find a little bit weak, I noticed the first time around, and when I rewatched it for this podcast episode, I had the same thing spring to mind. There's just the middle section of it, like before the hilarious suicide stretch, which sounds completely wrong to say that, but there's a hilarious section because we've gone to spoiler territory
Yes.
where he is trying to kill himself. So just before that, it gets like a little bit bogged down for me in some of the union and some of the politics stuff about, working in factories when, most of it's been, it's very, I don't want to say upbeat, but very bouncy, satire, full of, comedic ideas. It does get very dramatic for a little bit in the middle there before it becomes, this crazy, trying to kill yourself thing, and before it comes to everything else at the end. So the middle part of the film sags a little bit for me, but, overall, I think I can't remember if I gave it an 8 or a 9 the second time round, but look, I logged it again on Letterboxd. I put it up as 4.5 out of 5 stars. For me, it is one of those top-tier films to me. I think it's an absolutely excellent film, and I probably need to really rewatch Rogopaga because I can barely remember Gregoretti's sequence in it, except other than, just thinking it was just so much superior to the other 3 sequences that had come before it, even though he was the least known director for me of the 4 attached to that film.
It's interesting that the flaws we find in the movie are only minor flaws, and it's the same from my perspective as well. I feel that one element that doesn't really work so well is the brief love interest Omicron has with a lady who works in the canteen of the factory. And this could have been milked for lots of comical moments. Instead, Gregoretti takes us down quite a dark path that feels a little at odds with the rest of the film.
Yeah.
But I suppose because Omicron learns through imitation, he is not seeing people, with love interest. It's not something that he comes across until he reads through the books. And he reads one, I can't remember the exact title, but something to do with love. So until that moment, I suppose he's in the dark. But it could have made for a lot of hilarious moments if that was explored a bit more. But I'm pleased that it's in Sol's top 500 films. I don't think it would quite make my top 500, but it's very close. And it's great that, we've had a chance to rediscover this film because it's got hardly any votes on IMDb and Letterboxd, and it's definitely one that needs to be rediscovered because, it comes across as one of those hidden gems that needs more exposure. And I think a lot of people are going to have a great time with it, and quite a few people are certainly going to consider it as a favourite film of theirs.
Yeah, I might just mention on the Letterboxd thing that I did go recently and look at the reviews that had been logged for it. And, most of them have come out since early December when the variant was named for obvious reasons. But, most of the reviews have just sort by, when reviews are just jokey ones. So I don't know if those people have actually, watched the film or they've just thought of, something hilarious to say. Like one person's written, not one person wearing a mask, highly selfish behavior. And of course, that review's got a like in there. And, somebody else has written, here we go again. And it's got 3 likes. So I don't know if the people are actually watching the film. So it'd be great if we had more people actually watch it and write reviews rather than people going, oh, that's funny, I'm going to comment on this title, which seems to be what's happening a lot at the moment.
At least people are searching for Omicron, and people are finding this movie, and we do see memes flying around on Facebook, etc. as well from this movie, or at least of the posters. So who knows who has actually seen it, but it's clearly getting a big push, and it's all thanks to COVID.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I joked somewhere or whatever. This is like one of the few good things that have come out of COVID. Although I hope with the Delta outbreak, we didn't see a whole bunch of people rewatching or rediscovering the Delta Force, because that's nowhere near as classy a film as Omicron.
Yeah, I'm really happy I didn't have to rewatch the Delta Force for this episode. Really happy about that. And talking about good things that came out of COVID, it's probably no secret that this podcast, in so many ways, was born out of COVID as well. Being confined to our own homes was the catalyst that set all this into motion. And in that way, we share a slight connection to Omicron's newfound popularity. So yeah, let's just say at least 2 good things were born out of COVID, everybody. You heard about Omicron, and we had a platform to talk about it. And yes, as you all know, this is our very last episode of the season and the year. But do not worry, season 3 is coming up, and we have some really great stuff planned for you. We have one episode in particular talking about just one singular recent sci-fi blockbuster, and it's already recorded. I think you can easily guess which film I'm referring to. And you know what? We kind of like this format, so we might easily do a few more episodes focused on one specific film. We'll also have more best of the year counts-ups, including the obligatory best films of 2021. We'll have more industry interviews, and yes, more director-focused episodes. Andriy Tarkovsky is already pitched and in the works. Hell, we may even open up cans of worms on some controversial topics. So, thank you so much for listening. Feel free to go back through our library and discover or rediscover some of our older pearls, and we'll see you in 2022. Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, everyone.
You have been listening to Talking Images, the official podcast of icmforum.com.